The festival grounds were alive with light and laughter, an oasis of warmth against the frostbitten night. Strings of twinkling bulbs crisscrossed the square, their glow reflecting on snow that had piled in neat banks along the cobblestone streets. Children darted between booths, scarves trailing like banners, while adults sipped mulled wine and huddled by roaring bonfires. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my hands jammed deep into my coat pockets, surveying the scene with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. As the lead organizer for Black Hollow's annual New Year's festival, I should have been enjoying the fruits of my labor. But something felt wrong. It started subtly, like a splinter at the edge of your mind. The air wasn't just cold, it was sharp, biting in a way that cut through even the thickest wool. I glanced at the thermometer hanging from the lamppost beside my booth. The needle hovered far below freezing, lower than the forecast had predicted. "Looking good, Sarah," called Daniel, the town's mayor, as he passed by with his wife. I forced a smile and waved back, but the unease didn't budge. The wind stirred, carrying with it an unnatural stillness that smothered the festival's buzz like a damp blanket. Then I noticed it. The snow falling wasn't white. Under the string lights, it shimmered faintly, each flake tinged with an eerie, opalescent glow. I reached out, letting a few land on my glove. They melted instantly, leaving no trace. I frowned, wiping my hand against my coat. "Hey, Sarah!" My assistant, Mia, jogged over, cheeks flushed from the cold. "The generator's acting up again. Lights on the west side are flickering." "Figures," I muttered, following her toward the problem. As we crossed the square, my steps faltered. A group of festival-goers had gathered near the fountain at the square's center, their voices low and uncertain. A man, his face pale and stiff with shock, stood motionless beside the fountain's edge. "It just happened," a woman was saying, clutching her scarf tightly. "She was laughing one moment, and then she froze." I pushed through the crowd, my heart hammering. My breath caught in my throat. There, standing unnaturally still on the fountain's edge, was a young woman, her body encased entirely in ice. She was lifelike, down to the strands of hair frozen mid-flutter in an invisible wind. Her face was twisted into a look of wide-eyed terror, her hands outstretched as if she had tried to shield herself from something unseen. "What the hell?" Mia whispered. "She's still alive," someone said hoarsely. I crouched closer, dread pooling in my stomach. Through the translucent layer of ice, I thought I saw her chest rise and fall, barely perceptible, like the faintest flutter of a bird's wing. A low, icy wind swept through the square, snuffing out several of the bonfires and sending a shiver down my spine. I turned to Mia. "Call the paramedics," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But as she reached for her phone, another gust of wind whipped through the square. The lights flickered wildly, casting long, flickering shadows across the crowd. I turned back to the ice statue, and my stomach twisted in horror. The woman's eyes had shifted. They were no longer staring at the ground, but directly at me. The woman's frozen gaze burned into mine, so vivid and alive despite the frost encasing her, that I stumbled backward. Around me, the crowd stirred uneasily, their murmurs building into a low tide of fear. "Sarah?" Mia's voice cut through the din, her face pale. "Paramedics can't get through. Roads are frozen solid. They're saying it's some kind of freak ice storm." I nodded mutely, unable to tear my eyes from the frozen woman. The opalescent snow fell harder now, blanketing the square in an unnatural glow. Each flake seemed to hum faintly, their soundless song vibrating in my bones. "What the hell is going on?" Daniel's voice boomed over the crowd, his usual cheer replaced with unease. I shook myself, forcing authority into my tone. "Everyone needs to get inside. Now." But even as I spoke, I knew it wouldn't help. The air was wrong, too heavy, too sharp. It clung to my skin like static, thrumming with a presence I couldn't name. As the crowd began to disperse, I turned back to the fountain, hoping I'd imagined the movement in the woman's eyes. But she was still watching me, her frozen pupils tracking my every move. Then she blinked. A scream ripped through the air as I stumbled back again. My foot hit something solid, and I glanced down. Another ice statue, a child, his mittened hands reaching for a fallen snowball, was now at my feet. They were appearing everywhere. Panic erupted as more festival-goers began to freeze mid-step, their bodies locking into statues of terror. Each one was eerily lifelike, their poses and expressions captured in vivid detail. I grabbed Mia's arm, dragging her toward the event tent at the square's edge. We need to figure out what's happening. As we pushed through the flaps, my mind raced. This wasn't natural. Snow didn't glow. Ice didn't trap people alive. On the table near my clipboard, something caught my eye. A folded piece of parchment sealed with a wax stamp. My name was scrawled across the front in a spidery hand I didn't recognize. I broke the seal with trembling fingers, the paper crackling unnaturally loud in the silence. Beware the grasp of winter's hand. The festival calls what cannot rest. Leave now, or be claimed. The tent grew colder, frost creeping up the fabric walls. I looked at Mia, my breath visible in the dim light. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. The truth gnawed at my gut. "We're already too late." The tent's walls shuddered under the weight of the unnatural chill. Frost spread across the fabric like skeletal fingers, crackling as it crept closer. I stared at the note, its spidery handwriting shaking in my hands. "Beware the grasp of winter's hand," I murmured, the words a bitter echo in the icy air. "Sarah," Mia whispered, clutching her arms against the cold. "What does it mean? What's happening out there?" Before I could answer, a faint sound drifted through the tent, the rhythmic crunch of footsteps on snow. Mia froze, her breath hitching as the sound grew louder. It was slow, deliberate, and far too heavy to belong to anyone still alive. "Stay here," I said, though my voice trembled. Grabbing a flashlight, I pushed through the flaps into the storm. The festival square had transformed into a scene from a nightmare. Ice sculptures dotted the landscape like macabre decorations, their faces locked in silent screams. The once vibrant string lights flickered weakly, their glow swallowed by the swirling opalescent snow. And in the center of it all stood the fountain. Its stone surface gleamed with frost, and the frozen woman still perched on its edge, her unblinking eyes following me. The sight sent a fresh wave of dread crawling down my spine, but what drew my attention was what lay at her feet. An object rested there, faintly glowing beneath the layers of snow. My breath clouded the air as I knelt, brushing away the frost to reveal a jagged shard of ice. Its surface pulsed with an otherworldly light, and as I touched it, a jolt shot through my arm, cold and searing all at once. Images flashed before my eyes. An angry mob gathered in the square centuries ago, their torches burning against the darkness. A lone figure stood at the center, his face obscured by a heavy hood. Snow swirled around him as the mob shouted accusations. Sorcerer, traitor, bringer of famine. The last thing I saw was the figure raising his arms to the heavens, his voice a guttural chant that echoed through time. And then the vision ended, leaving me gasping for air, the shard trembling in my hands. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. My head snapped up, the flashlight beam slicing through the storm. Something, or someone, was watching me from the far side of the square. "Mia!" I shouted, stumbling back toward the tent. She met me at the entrance, her face pale. "What is it?" I held up the shard. "I don't know what this is, but it's tied to the snow, the ice, Everything. This is some kind of curse, and it's connected to the festival. Her eyes widened. The festival? What does that have to do with... A sudden gust of wind howled through the square, cutting her off. It carried with it a deep, resonant whisper, barely audible over the storm. He was betrayed. I turned back toward the square, my heart hammering in my chest. The statues seemed closer now, their frozen faces angled toward the tent as if they were watching. "Mia," I said, my voice tight. "We need to find answers. Now." We took refuge in the town library, a grand building of dark oak and cold stone that stood at the edge of the square. The frost followed us inside, creeping across the windows and chilling the air despite the crackling fireplace in the corner. "Look for anything about Black Hollow's history," I said, pulling books from the shelves. "Legends, curses, anything tied to the festival." Mia nodded, her movements frantic as she searched through brittle pages and faded photographs. It didn't take long to find what we were looking for. Tucked away in the archives was a leather-bound journal, its cover worn with age. The name on the spine sent a chill through me. Luther Kalin. "Isn't that..." Mia began, her voice trailing off. "Yes," I said grimly. "The man they accused of witchcraft." The journal detailed Luther's life as an outcast. It spoke of his exile during the harshest winter Black Hollow had ever known, when the townsfolk turned on him, blaming him for the famine that claimed dozens of lives. They left him to die in the woods, but before he succumbed to the cold, he swore an oath of vengeance. His final words were scrawled across the last page. "On the turning of the year, let my wrath be known. The frost will be my voice, and the snow my vengeance." Mia's hand flew to her mouth. "He cursed the town." I nodded, the weight of it settling over me like a shroud. "Every New Year's Eve, the festival wakes his wrath. That's why the snow is glowing. It's him." A sudden crash echoed through the library, followed by the shatter of glass. We spun toward the sound, and my stomach dropped. One of the ice statues was outside the window, its face pressed against the frost-covered pane. Its frozen eyes locked onto mine, and a jagged crack splintered across the glass. "We have to stop this," I said, my voice shaking. "The shard, it's part of him. We have to destroy it." Mia hesitated. What if it makes things worse? I didn't have an answer. But as the window splintered further, and the frost crept inside like living tendrils, I knew we didn't have a choice. Clutching the shard, I turned and ran toward the square, Mia close behind. The storm intensified as we approached the fountain, the glowing snow swirling like a vortex. The frozen woman was still there, but her face had changed. Her lips moved soundlessly, and her hands pointed toward the center of the fountain, where the ice pulsed with unnatural light. "This is it," I said, raising the shard. "This is where it ends." The storm howled, the frozen statues closing in around us. I gritted my teeth and plunged the shard into the fountain's heart. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then the ice cracked. The shard shattered against the fountain's icy heart with a deafening crack, its opalescent glow exploding into 1,000 fractured lights. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. No wind, no whispers, just the oppressive stillness of a held breath. Then the storm screamed. A blinding flash lit the square as the ground beneath us trembled violently. The ice sculptures surrounding the fountain cracked and groaned, their forms twisting unnaturally. I stumbled back, dragging Mia with me as jagged fissures snaked across the frozen ground, spilling blinding light from their depths. The storm took shape. A figure emerged within the vortex of snow and light, towering and spectral, its form shifting like smoke caught in a gale. It had no face, only a hollow void where its features should have been. Its arms stretched outward, long and clawed, its fingers trailing streams of glimmering frost. The whispering returned, louder now, overlapping in a cacophony of voices that filled my head. They betrayed me. They left me to die. You will join them. Luther Kalin. His presence was suffocating, the weight of centuries of rage pressing down on us. He stepped closer, his massive, shifting form causing the air to crystallize in his wake. The fountain froze solid again, but this time it pulsed faintly, as if in sync with the specter's movements. "We freed him!" Mia screamed, her voice nearly lost to the howling storm. "Sarah, we—" "No," I shouted, clutching her arm. My voice cracked with desperation, but I refused to believe it was over. "Not yet. There has to be a way to stop him." Kalin turned his void-like face toward us, and the whispers shifted into an ear-splitting roar. I dropped to my knees, clutching my ears against the sound. Around me, the ice sculptures began to move again, their limbs creaking and snapping as they turned toward the fountain. "No, no, no," Mia muttered, backing away as the frozen figures shuffled closer. Their glassy eyes were blank, but their movements were deliberate. They reached out with twisted hands, their jagged fingers clawing at the air. "Sarah!" I looked up just in time to see Kalin raise one massive clawed hand. He plunged it into the fountain, and a wave of frost surged outward, encasing the square in ice. Mia cried out as the ground beneath her feet cracked, threatening to pull her into the void below. My mind raced, searching for something, anything, to end this. The journal's words flashed through my thoughts. "The frost will be my voice, the snow my vengeance." The snow. "Mia, the snow!" I shouted, pulling her toward the fountain. "It's his power. We have to stop it." "What do you mean?" she gasped, her breath clouding the air. I didn't have time to explain. Scooping up a handful of the glowing snow, I hurled it into the fountain's core. The reaction was immediate, a sharp, crackling hiss as the snow began to dissolve. Kalin let out a deafening roar, his form flickering like a dying flame. "Help me!" I screamed. Mia understood. Together, we grabbed armfuls of the strange, glowing snow and threw it into the fountain. Each handful dimmed Kalin's form further, his clawed hands grasping at the air as if to stop us. The ice sculptures froze mid-step, their grotesque movements halted as the storm began to weaken. With one final burst of strength, I grabbed the largest pile of snow I could and flung it into the fountain. The ice cracked again, a web of fractures spreading across its surface before it shattered completely. Kalin let out one last, bone-chilling roar before his form dissolved into the air. The glowing snow vanished, melting into the ground as the storm died with him. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. The frost on the ground began to recede, the once unnatural glow fading into the pale gray of dawn. I turned to Mia, who was trembling but alive. Around us, the frozen figures began to thaw, their forms softening as life returned to their icy bodies. The woman on the fountain gasped, her breath visible in the frigid air as she blinked, dazed but alive. We watched as the other festival-goers returned to life, stumbling to their feet with wide, confused eyes. Relief washed over me like a wave, but it was short-lived. As the last of the frost melted away, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. A faint trail of glowing snow stretched away from the square, disappearing into the dark forest beyond. Mia followed my gaze, her expression grim. "Do you think it's over?" I didn't answer. The silence of the forest was too heavy, too knowing. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, I turned away from the square, my chest tight with the knowledge that we hadn't stopped the curse. We had only delayed it. Winter's grasp was far from broken. And as I walked into the cold morning air, I couldn't shake the feeling that it would return, stronger, hungrier, and waiting,